Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for the 24th in a 274-part series, I believe. A video which will take place in two separate playlists here on the channel. Number one, the Sylvia Plath read-along, where we are going poem by poem through the big yellow book by Sylvia Plath, if we can get that in there. And number two, the poetry discussion playlist here on the channel, a playlist that is now over 300 videos strong and heading towards 350 at lightning speed. I hope to get that playlist over 500 in 2024. Today's video will also include a comparison that I can't believe I've never made before. I came to the realization during this poem of this poet reminding me of someone's work that is just, it's almost too on the nose, and I can't believe I've never been here before. So the poem in question today, Miss Drake proceeds to suffer. Well, maybe. Miss Drake proceeds to supper, and it reads as such. No novice in those elaborate rituals which allay the malice of knotted table and crooked chair. The new woman in the ward wears purple, steps carefully among her secret combinations of eggshells and breakable hummingbirds, footing sallow as a mouse, between the cabbage roses which are slowly opening their furred petals to devour and drag her down into the carpet's design. With bird quick eye cocked askew, she can see in the nick of time how perilous needles grain the floorboards and outwit their brambled plan. Now through her ambushed air, a-dazzle with bright shards of broken glass, she edges with wary breath, fending off jag and tooth until, turning sideways, she lifts one webbed foot after the other into the still, sultry weather of the patient's dining room. Miss Drake proceeds to supper. Now, the comparison that I can't believe I've never made before, the observation of two authors that sort of have similar themes and messages oftentimes. For Sylvia Plath, it's not another poet. It's Shirley Jackson. Keep this poem in mind as I read you the opening paragraph to The Haunting of Hill House, or The Haunting, however it is that you want to remember this book. No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed by some to dream. Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood so for 80 years and might stand for 80 more. Within, walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there walked alone. Now, The Haunting of Hill House is roughly about a woman. So, Sylvia Plath was born in 1932, died in 1963. Shirley Jackson, born in 1916, died in 1965. Both of these authors lived too short of a life. When you think about Sylvia Plath, the real boom of Sylvia Plath's literary career, probably 1960 to 1963. When you think about Shirley Jackson, her publications go back much further into the 40s with, the short story about stoning. Anyway, when you think about Shirley Jackson, the author, probably it's the novels that you think about. Hill House published in 59. We Have Always Lived in the Castle, published in 1962. So the real overlap of these careers, Shirley Jackson, 59 to 62, Sylvia Plath, 60 to 63. In Hill House, what we have is essentially a woman who is living a life that she does not want, and it seems to have driven her to the point of cognitive desperation, where she would feel more comfortable almost creating a world around her than living the life that she has led. We have, with Sylvia Plath, a lot of those same types of tropes. We have in this poem, Miss Drake proceeds to supper. Here, let's do this. When we look at this poem, we're going to reread this poem, but I want you to keep in mind new woman in the ward. This phrase here, and of the patient's dining room. Let's keep those two phrases in mind and question the validity, question the authenticity, question the truthfulness behind them. Is this a woman who has been institutionalized? Or is this a woman who has created the institution around her by refusing to accept the reality in which she finds herself? She does not like her world, and she is, you don't want to use the phrase going crazy, because what does that mean? But perhaps having some type of breakdown, right? Midlife crisis, quarter life crisis, all of these things going on around Miss Drake. Question whether or not she is institutionalized, or whether this is an institution she has built for herself because she feels confined in the world that she occupies, the world that she inhabits. No novice in those elaborate rituals which allay the malice of knotted table and crooked chair. That's if you are confined to your home, being a housewife, etc., that's all going to feel like elaborate ritual. It's going to feel like the malice of knotted wooden table, the knots on the table, and the crooked chairs. You have to straighten the chairs. Everything has to be neat and tidy. No novice in those elaborate rituals which allay the malice of knotted table and crooked chair. The new woman in the ward wears purple, steps carefully among her secret combinations of eggshells and breakable hummingbirds, footing sallow as a mouse between the cabbage roses which are slowly opening their furred petals to devour and drag her down into the carpet's design. With bird-quick eye cocked askew, she can see in the nick of time how perilous needles grain the floorboards and outwit their brambled plan. Now through her ambushed air a-dazzle with bright shards of broken glass, she edges with wary breath, fending off jag and tooth until, turning sideways, she lifts one webbed foot after the other into the still, sultry weather of patient's dining room. Does that or does that not sound very much? No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. The absolute reality right here. Even larks and katydids are supposed by some. We have hummingbirds, and we don't have bugs, but we have cabbage roses. We have mice. By some, to dream, Hill House not sane. The woman in the ward of the patient's dining room stood by itself against the hills, holding darkness within to devour her into carpet's design. It had stood so for 80 years and might stand for 80 more. Within, walls continued uprights, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors sensibly shut. Where is it? Oh, I'm an idiot. Needless grain the floorboards and outwit their brambled plans. This is all very predictable. Predictable is not romantic. Not romantic is not worth living, is not worth sanity. We need the absolute unreality. We need the dreams. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there walked alone. Is this individual in this poem actually mad? Are they actually institutionalized? Or is this an institution that has been created by the speaker for herself, or by the subject for herself? I think that this is very much an of the time sort of question. We have here the 50s, the 40s and 50s becoming whole through literature. What were the 40s and 50s? Well, you had to do these things. You had to be this way. You had to, in fact, do these things because that was the way that things were done. The way that we lived was just predictable. The Lottery. That is the short story by Shirley Jackson. Sylvia Plath, Shirley Jackson. Now I'm getting my authors confused. But the world in which both Hill House and Miss Drake Proceeds to Supper were written in were worlds that were supposed to be very unromantic, very predictable. And the women in these worlds were supposed to have their place. This was at the end of the 50s, at the beginning of the dawning of the 60s, women really entering the workplace. So this was on the precipice of that change in the world, really, really earnestly entering the workplace. Um, the 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 population of potential employees doubling, the world as it were changing, the reality as it was accepted being different, forced people to reimagine the entirety of their lives. What has all of this life that I have lived been for? Again, Shirley Jackson, born in 1916, and Sylvia Plath, 1932. Social upheaval during these individuals' lifetimes was huge. And how much in our daily life do we have of social upheaval? I think it's important to maybe conceptualize this. If we're looking at bringing poetry and literature into our own lives to ask questions about our own lives and learn from literature, actually implement the lessons of literature, are we in a similar circumstance to the 1950s and the early 1960s? Are we on the precipice of more social upheaval? Are we in a world that has been fairly stagnant socially for a very long time? You have to imagine maybe. So, Shirley Jackson, born in 1916, the Industrial Revolution, 1880s, really, 1890s, 1900s, moving its way across the country. The advent of cars, I think there is a picture of some famous corner in New York in 1900, and then it was taken again in 1913 or something. In 1900, there were all horse and buggies and one car. In 1913, or whatever the actual year is, there are all cars and one horse and buggy. This was a time where things were things were generally the same. They were just progressing through their manifestation. What do I mean by that? The cars at the time were replacing horse and buggies, but it was the same kind of transportation. But things inside the house were basically all the same. Social things were basically all the same. Social norms, social standards. Social norms and standards in today's world have been fairly consistent since the 80s, I would say. Is this type of literature bubbling up today? This type of, so the manifestation of these two writers' lives and accepted realities cracking. Both of these authors questioning the reality around them. Is that sort of thing popping up today? I think those questions are worth asking. That's all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing that I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos a week. There's poetry every Monday. We are currently going through Ernest Hemingway's entire short story collection. There's a read-along series for that. We just finished up Dubliners by James Joyce. There's a read-along for Stephen King going on right now, and also A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. So I hope to have you back for the next video.